Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the fourth edition of the Feature Store Summit. And we're actually calling it the Data for AI Summit. So we're moving over towards data for AI as a term, and it's about real-time AI applications, batch applications, and large language models. My name's Jim Dowling. I'm CEO and co-founder of Hopsworks, and I'm going to be presenting the summit. I work at Hopsworks. Hopsworks organized this event. And Hopsworks are the OG feature store, at least in the open source space. We were first out there, and I think the first enterprise feature store. So we've got a great lineup for you today. There's a total of 15 presentations from 20 speakers. You'll notice that there's slightly less than 15 companies listed on the page because Uber are going to give a record 3 talks today. So I'm really looking forward to many of those. We have some speakers coming back from organizations, but 11 of the 15 are new. So we're really excited to hear a lot of new, exciting work that's happening in the data for AI space. I'll go through the agenda in a minute, but before we do, let's just do a little background on the conference. This is, I said, our 4th edition, and we have a record number of registrations this year. So I'm delighted to say we've 43% increase, over 4,000 people from 90 countries, not 190. And we can see that there's a lot of people coming in from, the States and India and all over the world, really. So we got some spots to fill in here, but in general, I think a lot of the world is very well represented. I think Africa we need to give a little push to, but otherwise, we're quite well spread. So as I mentioned already, it's the 4th edition of this conference. It's a virtual conference. We started in 2021, which is a virtual time. We've continued being virtual. But for those of you who aren't familiar with what feature stores are and what data for AI is, it kind of all started when Michelangelo platform was announced by Uber in late 2017, where they said, hey, we need data platform support for building AI applications. And at the end of 2018, Hopsworks came out as the first open source feature store, followed closely by Feast and many other platforms after that. So by 2021, vendors started selling feature stores, and that was the first edition of our conference. And since then, there's been a lot of evolution in the space. So there's been advances in real time for feature stores. We saw in 2022, Hopsworks is the first serverless feature store in 2023. And this year, we've seen a lot of new exciting developments. I mean, there's integration with large language models. In particular, vector indexes are appearing in feature stores. I know at least 3 feature stores, and one of which is Hopsworks, where we have vector indexes being embedded as part of the platform. And that's a really exciting development. It means that feature stores can be the data platform for all your AI. But I thought this year that we wouldn't talk so much about LLMs, because everyone is, and vector indexes, but another trend that's been very significant, which is that the offline store, the historical store of data for your feature store, is becoming the lakehouse. And in particular, this is a very interesting paper by Michael Stonebreaker and Andy Pavlo this year called What Goes Around Comes Around Again and Again, if you want to look it up. But they claim that cloud-based object storage using open formats, the lakehouse formats, will be the OLAP DBMS archetype for the next 10 years. And we've seen huge changes in the last couple of years where, proprietary data warehouses like Snowflake ensured you kept all the data in it. And then they open up to have lakehouse support for Iceberg tables and Databricks with Delta Lake. And of course, we have Apache Hudi as well. We have all these open standards, and all of the major cloud data warehouses now allow you to store your data outside of their platforms in shared storage on object store in lakehouse file formats. So table formats like Hudi, we have Iceberg and Delta Lake. And what's really exciting, I think, here is that this becomes an easy place to integrate analytics and AI, because one of the main features of the lakehouse is that you separate the storage of your data from how you query the data. So that means that AI systems can access the same data that analytics systems can access, and we don't need that integration at the data warehouse level that we've seen for quite a while. So there's going to be a talk about this, and hopefully you'll get something from it. Another significant event, and this is a little bit of a selfish one, is that, I come from an academic background, and feature stores don't. They come from very much an industrial-driven, needs-based background. So it's been companies pushing out the state-of-the-art here. But we haven't seen a huge amount of work in academia about feature stores. But this year we had a paper at the leading database conference called Sigmon. It was about the Hopsworks feature store for machine learning. And what was interesting, I think, about it is that it introduced benchmarks, and those benchmarks are public. And Dave Patterson, who's a very famous computer scientist from Berkeley, makes this claim that for better or for worse, benchmarks shape a field. And in order for the feature store community to become a mature field, we need some form of benchmarks with which to be able to measure things like feature freshness, term that we use quite a lot. So how real-time can my feature store platform be? But also, if I'm accessing data from a Python environment from my lakehouse, well, what is the experiments and benchmarks and typical queries we have to worry about there? So I think we'll see later on that, temporal queries to create point-in-time correct training data is a workload that's quite unique to this community. And that's something that's included in this paper. But also, of course, then, what type of queries and workloads do we have for real-time AI systems, such as recommender systems? So you'll find a bit more in that link if you want to go to the GitHub repo. It's all open source and reproducible. I'm going to do a little bit more self-publicity before we get started. I have a book I'm writing. It's called Building Machine Learning Systems with a Feature Store by O'Reilly. Several chapters are available already if you have access to O'Reilly's learning resources. You can get a couple of chapters, I think, for free if you go search for it. I think it's available on the HopSearch website. So without any further ado, let's present the agenda for today. We have lots of exciting talks. If you're in Pacific Coast America, it's 8:30 a.m. currently. Welcome and good morning. For the rest of the world, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're going to have our first talk is by HopSearch, by Raymond Cunningham. He's going to talk about from feature store to AI Lakehouse. Going to be followed by Uber, talking about their GenAI on-call co-pilot journey. Airbnb are coming back again to talk about Chronon, and they've open sourced Chronon. It's their feature engineering framework. And then we have Etsy for the first time talking here, and they're going to talk about serving real-time features. We'll have a small break, so you can go get some refreshments. And I'm glad then we'll have Stripe. So we're really excited to hear what Stripe have to say about how they built a high-scale, low-latency machine learning framework with Flink. Then we'll have the second vendor talk of today with Chalk. We'll talk about how they do real-time feature serving for online inference, followed by a talk that we're working on here at HopSearch, which I think is kind of interesting. Is the data model for our feature store, should it be a star schema? And Javier will argue that we should move towards a snowflake schema data model, which I think is quite an interesting innovation in the space. Then we're going to have Intuit talking about how they built a feature store as a service. A little break, and then we'll move on to another talk by Uber about their key value store in Cassandra that they use for feature serving. TurboML will talk about how they use fresh data for machine learning. We'll have Quix, who are a vendor making a platform for streaming analytics. They'll talk about how you enable low latency fraud detection with real-time feature engineering. Varo Bank will talk about how they build features on their feature-driven approach to smart banking. We'll have another talk by Uber again, this time on scalability challenges in building large-scale embedding feature generation at Uber. Roche are going to talk about their platform. Roche are, as you know, a pharmaceutical company, and how they accelerate feature engineering through generative AI. And we'll have another vendor, Fennel, talking about their primitives for maintaining data and feature quality. And that's the agenda for today. I think it's a pretty exciting agenda, you can agree. Lots of different talks from a mix of companies solving problems related to scalability and real-time and large language models, to vendors providing novel and interesting solutions, I think, in this particular space. So as I mentioned before, I work with HopSearch. We organize the Feature Store Summit. We organize the Feature Store community. There is also a Slack channel, and the Slack channel is where I would ask you to go and ask questions to the speakers. There may be time for speaker questions at the end, there may not, but you'll be able to access the speakers, I hope all of them, on the Slack channel. You'll notice if you're logged in through Zoom that there is an ability to ask questions. There's a chat function, but there's also a question function, I believe, so you should prefer to use the question function if it's there. So the Slack, I can see that there's a link to the Slack in the chat at the top. So if you go to that, you'll be able to join the Slack. Otherwise, just Google, if you're on YouTube, featurestore.org, and you'll find a link to the Slack there. We'll be able to ask questions to the speakers. So we've been organized by HopSearch, but we've also have partners helping promote the event. So Decoding ML, which is a very popular newsletter, as is Real World ML by Pao Bafo. And then, of course, NumFocus, who organized the PyData and PyCon conferences. excuse me, sorry. So this is where you find our Slack channel. So if you have a phone and you're on the screen, you can scan that QR code, or you can just go to featurestore.slack.com to register there.